You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. All right. Welcome to another MPL Live session. These are quickly becoming one of our favorite things to do. It's always nice to switch it up. We do a lot of podcast episodes, and this is now our second live session, and it's a lot of fun. And
A little more
so
stressful, but a lot of fun.
and like a little bit more nerves with the live audience, honestly,
Yeah.
but it's fun. And so before we get to the main topic with Matt and Harris, let's get started with good news stories. So for those of you that follow the pod, you're already familiar with this, but we start every episode the same way, and that's with something that we call good news stories. We all share a story from the last week or two, could be personal, could be work related, and we like for our guests to go first. So, Matt, Harris, do y'all have anything?
Go for it, Harris.
So I think last time in an MPL pod, I talked about my kid learning ice skating. That was like a year and a half ago. And now he's into ice hockey. He's a 5.5-year-old. And I'm so bad at ice hockey. I don't know ice hockey. I'm so bad at ice skating. But he's now convincing me to learn how to ice skate so I can try to play ice hockey with him. It's a lot of fun. He's part of a little league, but
I bet it's
definitely
super
learning
cute too with the outfits.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And the mats and the padding
yeah.
and everything. It's adorable. That's my personal good news story there.
So good. I did not have the coordination for ice skating. Mine's a win, but it's a semi plug. So I hope you don't mind. But it's I launched something this week called it's an APAC themed, or it's an APAC focused event for startup people leaders, called the Startup People Summit. And I launched it this week, and the response has been amazing. So like way better than I thought it was going to be for this kind of one of a kind event happening later in the year. So yeah, for me, my win was seeing the response from my network and just the interest in general for that. So if you're in the APAC region and looking for something to do in July, I've got that running.
And I can go next. Well, before I go next, for those of you in the audience, drop in the comments your good news story. We want to hear some good news stories from you guys as well. So mine is that we are just a few days away from launching something brand new at the Modern People Leader. It's something that we're going to call MPL Build, and you'll hear more about this in the coming days, but my entire day up until now has been getting a lot of the finishing touches worked out. And so, as Steven says, I'm a little nervous-sided, but yeah, that's my good news story. The best HR leaders that we've had on the show don't just talk about AI, they're actually using it, like right now, in real practical ways. And so that's why when ChartHop shared that they're bringing back 2-minute talks, and this time it's all about AI, I got pretty excited. And so on June 4th, they're having their first 2-minute talk in a while, and it's going to be a handful of HR leaders. Each HR leader is going to get 120 seconds to talk, and they're only allowed to bring one slide each. So no theories, no fluff, just real stories of how they're using AI in their day-to-day work. If this sounds like your jam and you want to attend, I'm going to drop the link to sign up in the show notes. And honestly, I'm probably going to go sign up myself right now. So yeah, go check it out.
I just shared mine in the chat. My good news, I'm going to go work and personal. On the work side, well, on the personal side, I've had a bad sinus cold. It's that time of the year in Austin. So like allergies are super bad, but I'm feeling better and good timing for this session. My work related are these sessions like this, the fact that we have now a virtual kind of channel that we can go deeper into topics that we talk a lot about on the show is super exciting. And Daniel will tell you that I've been the big proponent for these. So thanks for joining our second session on compensation. And so with that, we have a lot we want to cover today, and I want to make sure that we get to all of it. And so I'm gonna quickly just tee things up on why we're talking about compensation. You may be wondering, like, God, this is a really specific topic for the MPL to focus on. We've talked a lot about this topic over the last year. And through the conversations we had with HR leaders, we started to hear a narrative. And as you know, for those of you that listen to the podcast, when we hear a narrative, we like to share it with our audience. And so some of the things that we've heard is that compensation is more complicated than ever in 2025. And with that said, the problem is that HR, it's still problematic for HR. So we spend weeks, months on a single pay review. HR teams are cutting spreadsheets, they're doing manual work, checks, user testing things. They're doing the same thing for headcount, which is its own separate standalone process. And, transparency was a buzzword. It's kind of died down a little bit, but we all know that it's something, transparency is needed, but it feels daunting and honestly kind of confusing. And that we're going to talk about that today. So as a function, comp has grown massively. I think the expectations are higher. At a time that we actually have less resources. In our research, we found that the HR teams are spending less than 15% of their HR budget on comp solutions, which blows my mind given that comp's one of the biggest OpExes. And with the younger generations entering the workforce, there is this pressure for more transparency. So today we're going to unpack a lot of the things that I just mentioned. We're going to unpack what's not working. We're going to give you a playbook for how to fix it. And, just really quickly, fun fact about me, I started my career in compensation. I was a comp analyst in the tax practice at Ernst & Young. Then I jumped ship to my last client, which is Goldman Sachs, and I worked in total rewards there. Did a variety of different things, but the last comp review that I was a part of was in 2009, and it was a nightmare. It's exactly what you would imagine a comp process looking like in 2009. Highly manual. Goldman had like 5 or 6 different systems. We were using none of them for compensation. Everything was spreadsheet exports and cobbling things together. And so when we started spending more time in comp last year through our consulting, I was shocked to hear that many are still doing it the same way, and they still have the same struggles that I had in 2009. And so I'm curious, for those in the audience, what are some of the biggest challenges you and your team are facing, specifically in the comp space? Like, I just want to know, like, maybe my experience is one off, but would love to know what you guys are experiencing out there. And so, Matt, like, let's go ahead and jump into the conversation while some of these are trickling in. Why are the challenges? Why is what I shared so relatable? Like, why are these challenges still happening today?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I actually, they're not just relatable. I actually think they're compounding at the moment. Like, if you think of, I always like to really sort of focus on the environment we're in at the moment to start with. But for me, you've kind of got these like 3 massive drivers that in my mind are kind of creating a lot of the angst and the uncertainty around compensation, and kind of leading it to be something that needs a little bit more focus from companies. So first and foremost is that in the last couple of years, we've seen a massive drive legislatively around pay transparency. So companies increasingly are expected to share the salary associated with a role, either just to candidates or to their employees as well. And I think what what a lot of companies came to learn through that process is that sharing the number is really only part of the equation. So there's the number, and then there's everything that goes into it. Why, how do we land on that number? What goes into it? What's it made up from? How did we, what's the reasoning and the justification behind it? That like challenge has continued to exist for a lot of organizations. And I think closely related to that is that you mentioned younger generations, like Gen Z are about to become about 25% of the workforce in the next couple of years. They're definitely not afraid to ask around pay. There's really no taboo when it comes to having that discussion. And I think increasingly we're seeing them sort of have this view that, or rather that they don't see employment for life anymore. They really don't see, companies as being that place they go to forever. They retire at 65 and then they have their holidays and things like that. So it's a very, very different relationship. And I think that's more increasingly putting the emphasis on that entire employee value proposition. Comp is just one part in the chain. And how can we optimize that to be a to be an optimizer and to be a value add rather than a detractor or just kind of a baseline experience. The last one I'd say, obviously very relevant to this, is that the last few years have seen a huge, huge change in the tech that is available for companies to handle compensation. You know, smaller and smaller companies are getting access to greater and greater tools, and it's making, or I guess it's putting the power in their hands to be more competitive and really turn comp from a sort of underwhelming transactional experience into much more of that value driver. And so I think that again is kind of creating this pressure within the industry for people to be able to really get this right and kind of move out of spreadsheets, move out of it being something that we just focus on getting done, to actually focus on it being a real value add. How can we optimize the employee experience? Which is something I always really like to frame this from the perspective of, I mean, you know, some of the things that I think about with companies that are struggling in this space, one of the most common ones would be that I see this sort of Severance. I like that show, but that's what made me think of. But this sever between the link of reward and incentive, right? Like you mentioned it before, Stephen, like this is one of the biggest costs to companies. They want to make sure it's working for them. And how often in your experience, certainly in my experience, was I handed a letter or handed something to say, hey, Matt, congrats, you've got a 2% pay increase. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Where did that even come from? And so, well, maybe I got a 10% pay increase, but I wasn't told it was for, you know, great performance or something like that. So I think that's where the focus is shifting, is like, how can we actually make the numbers meaningful? How can we make the process really enjoyable for people and for their managers as well, right? You don't want them feeling unequipped. You don't want them feeling disempowered. They get these questions all the time. And if there's anything I remember hating when I was internally, it was always that constant, like, go and speak to HR, go and speak to the people team. Like, I think being able to empower them with information and data and just a narrative helps them be more effective at their job as well. So yeah, that's about a million things, but there's a lot going on in that space that I think is just shifting the onus, right?
I'm telling you, I'm totally obsessed with this topic. And it's cool it's like compensation is having its moment. Like all of the things that you talked about, I agree with completely. Just to share some of the things that I'm seeing here in the chat, there's some really good pain points here. Amanda put comp and salary bands across multiple states as an issue. Another one is the mismatch between leadership's comfort with transparency and employee desire and legislation, quite honestly. That's another good one.
The one that
I'm
hurt
seeing
for me to read was from Corey. Also, employees think that if they do a Google search, their info is better than ours. And I've definitely been guilty of that. So yeah, that one hurt to read.
woof.
But
Yeah,
it's
that
because they
is a
don't know
good
what's reasonable, right? Like it's because they don't know what you're basing your number on, which that's what I find often. It's like help them understand where your numbers come from and then tell them why, you know, or I can at least help them understand why their numbers aren't maybe as reliable. But it's a common problem.
Well, and I think that's where we hurt ourselves in HR, where when things are so black boxish that it seems like it's a mystified type of thing. And I think that elicits a lack of trust or mistrust. Like, these numbers can't be right because you're really not sharing with me how you got here or any details for that matter. And I want to I think, Haris, I want to get your thoughts on that. But really quickly in the chat, for those of you on this with us, let me know like who is struggling with like the fact that so much time is being spent in merit cycles, so much manual time and headcount management as well. I was just shocked to hear that so many companies like have custom spreadsheets. It's just a whole thing. So I'm curious, let me know what's a bigger problem for you? Is it headcount management or is it merit cycles being too manual? So Haris, I want to get your thoughts. I know you work with a lot of companies that are struggling with these issues, and you've seen real world solutions being put into place. So I'm just curious, what do you relate to what Matt shared, and can you share with us some of the solutions as well?
Yeah, I mean, like everything Matt said is really spot on. So I plus one to that. I'll say that a lot of leaders have kind of recognized or realized that they want to solve these problems. But then the second part of the problem, I think, is once you come to the realization, it's like you need all your, like, to make good decisions, you need all your employee information in a single place. It's not just about, hey, what does the market benchmark say in Australia or in San Francisco? It's who are the employees? What's our pay strategy? What are our budget rules? Like what performance metrics we want to drive? So you need a holistic picture, and that means the HR stack needs to talk to each other. And what often happens is it doesn't. So then folks are left with dumping all this information into spreadsheets. And then when you do that with spreadsheets, people teams, HR teams are spending a lot more time in spreadsheets and a lot less time on strategy, right? Like I think the value add and where humans can kind of really drive value is like the strategic insights, the Matt, you said like employee experience, candidate experience, like those parts versus slicing and dicing, geo tiers and all of that kind of stuff, right? I saw some notes in the comments and totally agree with you around the complexity, Matt. The tighter macroeconomic climate means it's not just like 2021 where you can give people whatever they ask for. You have to tie it to KPIs and business KPIs, and you want the whole organization to understand that, right? It's much more of a multi-player problem as well. So like at least with some of our customers, I'll give a shout out to two of them maybe who are forward looking and have done a pretty good job. So Krafton is a video game company originally from Korea, but has offices in India, China, the US. Comp strategy in each of these countries is very different. I've learned a lot about how people think about comp in Korea, and I'll tell you, it's definitely not Blackpink. So it's very different from how we think about it in the US. And so just aligning on the strategy, cross HR teams, cross departments, that's pretty big. And so if you have a single view of your workforce and you can understand what they're doing, that's a foundation for then being able to think about comp. The other shout out I'll give is a customer of ours called Fleetio. So they have a lot of logistics software for drivers and stuff like that. And so they have high tech workers, they have low tech workers, and there's different comp expectations by employment type, by industry, by geo. So a lot of complexity. And the people team and the finance team are collaborating because they realize comp is an input to ultimately it's about your workforce planning, hiring the best people, keeping them and motivating them and incentivizing them so that you achieve your business goals. And so talking about multiplayer problem, it's empowering the finance team, the HR team to work together, the different department leaders to be part of that process. That's how you really truly kind of can solve the macro problems. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Quick question that I want to ask back, Harris and Matt, feel free to jump in and share your thoughts also. I feel like job architecture has come a long way. Back in 2009, the Web 2.0 wasn't even a thing yet. We weren't really using SaaS at the enterprise level. And so job architecture, you were hiring companies like Hewitt or Willis Towers Watson to do these really complex things. And now the beauty with modern tech is that there are ways of doing job architecture. I won't say it's easier, but it's a lot more scalable and feasible to work on. And the more I learn about job architecture, the more foundational it seems to everything, like all aspects of AHR. Like if we had concentric circles, for me, job architecture would be in the middle because it's so important to a lot of the other aspects of HR. And so I'm just curious, like what's the big disconnect there? Because I know a lot of companies either have an overly simplified job architecture or they don't have anything at all. Like I'm just curious to get your thoughts on the job architecture pain.
Yeah, I mean, like definitely, Stephen, I'd say it's very core. A lot of companies, even if you're a 50-person company, job architecture is relevant and important to you as well. Yes, it doesn't need to be as fleshed out as like a 500 or 5,000 person company, but how are you deciding who to hire, what the right skills are, what the right competency, what the right JD is, what does the career path look like for that person? So when it's hiring, or you have employees in seat, they hit their 1 year mark, and then they're asking about like, hey, what's next? Do I get more money? Do I get a promotion? Job architecture is really about like having a roadmap for different roles and like, what you expect from them now and what you expect from them in the future and providing that education and transparency. So definitely very, very important. And I think, yes, it's hard because maybe for a number of different reasons. Matt can also chime in here, but people think they have to build it out like, like an academic exercise where there's like 8 levels, like Radford with like, and the nice thing is a lot of these survey providers created frameworks to help simplify things. But the downside of that is everyone thinks that you have like if it's all or nothing, but that's really not true. Sometimes we tell customers like, hey, you're 50%, you're starting small, maybe flesh out your engineering department or your sales department, or don't have 4 geo tiers, even though like, yes, you'll optimize costs maybe a little bit better or spend, maybe just have 1 or 2. And so there are ways to step into it. And I think so that's one. And the other thing I think you have to communicate to your leadership team and your management team and your employees is kind of like software development. It's agile, like it's iterative. We'll get some things wrong, but we're putting something in place and we'll figure out what works for us, right? Like we don't have to take what was written in a book somewhere. Let's figure out what works for us and then evolve it over time as well. And so I think just communicating that out really lowers the barrier, because I know teams, they get their wrist slapped when there's an unhappy employee saying, I'm underpaid. No one will say they're overpaid, but I'm underpaid, or I searched Google, or I saw some comp analysts on TikTok telling me this XYZ, but they're missing all this other context: your tenure, your performance, like how much fund you've raised, what your company KPIs are. There's a lot more underneath the iceberg that you have to be able to kind of communicate to organizations.
Love that. I love that. Well, I'm going to keep us moving because we haven't even reached the main segment, y'all. Like there's so much more that we're going to share. So bear with us here. Like the next segment is what we call, it's, if you listen to the podcast, it's most like rapid fire. And so what we want to do now is unveil what we believe to be the modern playbook for compensation. And so when we ask why our listeners are such fans of the modern people leader, it's usually because in these conversations that we have with HR leaders, they're sharing like the playbooks they're using. And so the idea is with this segment that we're going to unveil the modern playbook for compensation. And so it's going to be a back and forth segment. And we're going to look at 3 main aspects. We're going to look at philosophy, strategy, and architecture. I saw in the chat someone comment, like, I can't even get my executives bought into a philosophy. Like, where do I go from there? Well, we're about to talk about that. We're also we're going to dig into comp reviews. I saw a lot of people mention paying around your merit cycles, and we're going to share some hacks and tips on what you can do there. And then we're going to wrap up with the employee experience. Honestly, that's my favorite part, just because some of the things you can do today just weren't possible back in the day. And I know I keep dating myself. And so let's kick things off. So first, Matt, you're up. We skipped you with the architecture. I know you're going to share some of what you probably would have shared there, but walk us through the critical elements. Like, how do you define philosophy, strategy, and architecture today? I know that's a lot in a rapid fire context, but give us what you got.
So we keep coming back to the Annie Dean episode, and that's for a reason. Atlassian has mastered the art of running a distributed team, and Annie shared something that really stuck from their internal data. Daily office visits don't drive team connection, but 3 to 5 days of intentional togetherness, that does. They found that bringing teams together a few times a year led to a 37% increase in team connection, and that boost lasted about 4 or 5 months. So just let that sink in. It's not constant office time. It's not more Zooms. It's just one well-planned offsite every few months. That in-person time really matters. Not daily, but deliberate. Retreats, offsites, onsites, sales kickoffs. These are the moments that fuel culture, creativity, and collaboration. The problem that we see? Corporate group travel is extremely painful to plan, and it's one of the biggest line items on your budget. And so that's where Marco comes in. They make corporate group stay as easy as booking a personal hotel room. Think Airbnb, but for groups of up to 500 people. 1, they're going to negotiate on your behalf, so you'll get 20 to 30% cheaper prices on hotels. 2, the properties are handpicked for corporate group travel, so you're going to have the right mix of meeting spaces, communal areas, on-site dining options, and other group-focused amenities. Lastly, their AI-powered search makes it really easy for you to find that perfect hotel based on group size, city, vibe, whatever it is that you're looking for. And honestly, when Suman, Marco's co-founder, walked us through how it works, we were blown away by how simple it is to book group travel with them. Something that's been historically very manual and kind of complex. So if you're planning your next team offsite, leadership retreat, or full company gathering, I highly recommend you go check out Marco. There are no contracts, no signups, and it's 100% free. Go check them out at mpl.marcoexperiences.com. That's mpl.marcoexperiences.com.
Yeah, all of that in a couple of minutes. All right. So, I mean, comp philosophy for me is very much like the embodiment of how we think about pay as a business. It definitely needs to have the strategy element baked into it, which is really like, who are the kinds of people, what are the kinds of skills that we need as an organization? And that needs to be linked back up to, as an organization, what are we here to do? What's our mission? What are we trying to achieve? For me, starting with a compensation philosophy, it's the best place to start from my perspective is always from kind of like a set of guiding principles, which are really like your values, but for how you approach pay. Really simple example, are you a company that deeply values individualism or kind of like meritocracy, or are you a very like equity driven? So I've had excuse me, I've had clients who've been both, where performance was very deeply linked to pay, and you might have had very different pay amounts and quite broad pay bands for a specific role, versus a company that had pay points. So literally everyone doing the same job was paid the same no matter how well they were performing, and each was right for them. And this needs to be a process of you getting a sense and a grounding of what's right for you as an organization. How to do this, let's get really practical. Obviously your exec team have to be involved in this. I think having a really kind of blank canvas session around how we think about pay as a business is a really great place to start. And you can even do it by just prefacing some like common pay scenarios and asking them what they think, and kind of stoking the discussion from there, and trying to simmer it down to about, I don't know, anywhere from sort of 3 to 7 principles around how you think about pay. Because the next step is then, how do we start to turn these into reality? How do we turn these into pay practices? Critical step that I'd also say is really important as part of this is, don't disregard how important the role is that your people play in this. A lot of people I speak to are like, oh, I want to involve my people. They're just going to ask more money. Yeah, not always. So it really comes from like, it depends on how you frame the question. I mean, I think you really want to be thinking about it again from the perspective or the lens of a talent strategy. Who are the individuals that are really critical skills right now for our organization? Can we understand what's important to them? What are the growth roles that we're expecting on our headcount plan? Can we just understand a little bit more about what is or isn't working for them? What attracted them to come and work for us? What are the things that are the benefits that maybe aren't working? Just get a real grounding around what is right for your business, because it not only helps whatever you land on from a comp philosophy to be more effective, but it helps you build more trust as well, because people have actually had a say. It's kind of, it's involved them as how it's gone, how it's been built. I'm trying to rapid fire this so much for you. So
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Pay position. I'm going to pay position is probably like, the heart and the soul of the comp philosophy. This is really like, how much do you want to pay relative to the market? So for me, there's 3 things you really want to consider here: competitiveness, internal equity, and affordability. I've seen internal equity come up a couple of times in the comments, so hopefully this helps address some of the bits there. Competitiveness, really as simple as like, what percentile do we want to pay compared to the market? And also kind of, who is the market? Who do we compare ourselves to? Who are our peer groups? For this, I'd say it really depends on your business model. Do you have great margins? Or if you're a startup, are you expecting great margins once you become generating revenue and things like that? How hard is it to find the talent that you're looking for? Is it a real buyer's market? Are you able to find the people really easily? Or actually, is it quite constrained and you need to be more competitive in that space to be able to bring the people in that you need to be able to hit your goals as well? Internal equity. So if we've chosen our competitive position as an organization, do we need to have that same level of competitive positioning across the board? Can we be more competitive for some roles and less for others? A really quick example, I did some work for a small software company customer experience team, heart and soul of the business. They were the most critical part, they decided, of their talent strategy. And so the decision they made was to pay them 90th percentile. I don't know if anyone here has ever seen customer experience salary data before. Tend not to be the most well-paid roles in a tech organization. These guys cranked the salaries. They wanted these people to know how important they were to the organization. They didn't want turnover. Typically can be quite a high turnover space. And so that for them made sense, but they weren't 90th percentile across the board. So something to consider there. Last, and probably most important, is, can I actually afford this? We've come up with all these beautiful guiding principles. We've chosen our competitive positioning. What's this actually going to cost for the business to implement, and what does that look like in reality? This is obviously a crucial part where you get to keep that great friendship you have with finance going. So make sure that you can actually afford the thing that you've said you wanted to do. Obviously, that naturally sort of segues into finding the benchmark data and sort of comparing ourselves to it, understanding what we say our place is in the market. Are we comparing ourselves to companies of a similar size? Are we, similar industry, maybe geographies, things like that? I think that sort of critical question to ask yourself in this stage is, who do we lose talent to, or who do we hire talent from? Make a short list. Again, this is a great way to involve your people. If you weren't working here, where would you go and work? Where have you come from? Where have we lost people to? All of these sorts of questions are really great ways to go, okay, who are our peer groups? Who do we compare ourselves to when it comes to salary data? Start to frame that up in the sense of, again, that affordability question. All right. Job architecture. It's kind of, this for me is really the like transmission or translation between our comp strategy and what we're trying to achieve, and then the market. I mean, we talked before about, and Haris gave some great examples about how job architecture works and how to consider it. For me, this is one of the most critical parts of this is like, you really want an apples to apples comparison between the market. I think some of the biggest issues I see crop up is that job architecture can minimally be someone's title. And let me give you, this is a HR audience, let me give you one of the most challenging ones is like head of HR. It could mean anything, or HRBP. I've seen some like incredibly junior HRBP roles. I've seen some incredibly senior HRBP roles. The span on pay for a HRBP could probably be, and maybe I'll use a US context, it could probably be like $70,000 to $170,000. I'm not even kidding. Like that's, so really what you want to do is kind of get beneath the title and understand the scope, the role, the responsibilities, all these sorts of things. And this is why job architecture is so important. Understand those things, because when you do get that market data, you want to make sure that you're comparing yourself to a comparable role and avoiding some of those challenges that Haris mentioned before. I'm underpaid, or actually the inverse issue from a commercial perspective is that you're overpaying for talent as well. So I know I have brought in job architectures and comp benchmarking at a number of different companies, and there's always a bunch of people that are underpaid, and there's always a bunch of people that are overpaid. So the goal here is you're preventing this from moving forward. So you're both saving money in terms of preventing overpay, but you're also preventing turnover and preventing real risk in your talent strategy by ensuring people aren't underpaid. Lastly, I think I would say about this is like, how do we actually know when this is working? How do we know when our comp philosophy is working? So for me, one of the most common ones is like comp ratio. How do we measure our employees' salaries compared to the market? Depending on your organization and your strategy, you might be looking at between a 0.9 and a 1.1 in terms of where people sit in their span against the median. But another couple of really key ones to look at is turnover. Everyone should be doing turnover, exit interviews, exit surveys, things like that. Is pay a real driver of turnover? Can we see issues there that are starting to crop up relating to pay that we haven't factored into our pay strategy? Another really great one is offer acceptance as well. Let's just say we have a market position of 50%, we're going to market, and all of our candidates, 90% of them are saying that our salary is too low. We're probably not paying 50th percentile. We might need to revisit our band. So offer acceptance or rejection can be a really great kind of canary in the coal mine for our bands not being effective. And look, I've had this issue in the past where I've been the biggest sort of defender and supporter and protector of our salary bands. You have to really lean into that relationship with talent acquisition and make sure that you're being conscious and aware of where this is presenting as a barrier to hiring people, but also recognizing when actually it's the bands that are wrong and they need to change. So it's an incredible balance to maintain there. We've talked about a lot.
You did not disappoint. Yeah, you did not disappoint. And it always boggles my mind how many companies have exit surveys, but yet that process isn't connected to their comp process. And so there's like such valuable data there to be harnessed that is not, that is just being missed. So Haris, now it's your turn for the rapid fire component. I think Matt just laid out a great playbook and conceptually the things that should be factored in. Like, how is this all supported from a technology perspective? Would love to get your view and to hear about some solutions that you are putting in place and you're seeing.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll call out like people are like, hey, Matt had like a day of knowledge that he shared with us in like 5 minutes. So two things. One, we'll have an ebook as well that Matt and I are putting together with MPL that we'll share next week. So it doesn't have to be like an exam where you're furiously taking notes, folks. Here we will document all of it. And just talking about documentation. Not that I can cover all the things that Matt did, and he did an amazing job, but I'm just going to start with one slide and then go into like some software as well. So this kind of encapsulates a lot of what Matt was talking about. Like when you are designing your compensation philosophy, you need to think about a lot of different things. It's not just benchmarking data. It's hiring, it's your company mission, it's your talent strategy, it's how are existing employees doing, what behavior do you want to drive in your organization? So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that folks have to kind of think about. And so I'm just putting the visual there. And I know Matt did an amazing job talking about a lot of these different things as well. And so, but then how does this manifest itself from a tool perspective? Or what can a tool do for me? So, we talked about like there's two core inputs. One, you have to understand your existing employees. Two, you have to understand like the market, and then you can come up with the right job architecture and the pay band strategy. What you're seeing here in CandorIQ is a single view of all your employees. So everything from like payroll to cap table to performance reviews to variable comp to bonuses, etc. And it's basically your command center for HR. You can open it up to managers as well. So you can see all the employees, who's above band, who's below band. You can stitch different systems together so you don't have to do this in a spreadsheet. Like find me all the top performers, but who are the top performers who are below their pay bands? And then you can see the three people so that you can maybe take action on them immediately. Or you're a people leader and you're having one-on-one conversations with one of these employees, and they're asking for more money, which I'm sure no one in HR has ever heard before. But so then how do you tie like with their pay history and equity history and promotions? Like you can dig into that employee and see their equity history, pay history, if that's set up, where they sit in the band, what does the next level look like? There's also analytics around, what does the future, like how do they sit versus their peers? But kind of having a single view of your workforce now and in the past is super duper important. I think another key input, Matt, that you were talking about was being able to look at your job architecture, comparing that to the market on an ongoing basis, and comparing it to your employees, right? Because you have to kind of connect the dots. So here you can see like a job architecture built out for engineering, and this can be in different countries and currencies as well. But if you click in, then you can see what's the average comp ratio, which employees are in band, which employees are out of band. So you can see the pay progression, all of that as well in the tool. Here I'm comparing to the market, so I have Mercer data, but at CandorIQ, we have many different partnerships, and you can bring in Radford, other data sources as well as necessary. But you can see the 10th to 90th percentile versus your pay ranges. Is your P3 a P4 or P5, or like where does this sit and how competitive you are? And if the market data is moving, you'll get notified that like, hey, the market data has moved by 5% versus the midpoint of your pay band. So tools can definitely help because they can help flag, they can be alert, they can be proactive. Those are some of the ways, but 2025 and everyone's talking about AI and what can AI do for me. So at least at CandorIQ, we've built a series of AI agents that can play the role of comp analyst. They definitely cannot replace a Matt McFarlane because he qualitative value, but can definitely run analysis for you, right? So I'm jumping here. Like this is an example homepage of what a HRBP or an admin might see. Everyone from things that you care about, like alerts, like who's above band, below band, how competitive are you versus the market, what's your head count, how much you're spending, span of control, pay fairness, etc. Right? But every organization I've learned has different questions, and they're like framing it differently and asking it differently. So the way to solve this long term is, I think, through a combination of Gen AI and like really bringing all the data from all your HR stack together, right? So at least with CandorIQ, you can ask it questions at the individual employee level, at the team level, at the department level, and it can do analytics for you across the board and in real time and explain its logic. So here I'm asking about like one single employee. I didn't even type it correctly, but it can understand me, so already kind of ahead of the curve, and it's saying Brad Armstrong is a P2. This is their comp ratio. This is the range. If you want to click in and learn more about Brad Armstrong, the AI is like linking you to more information about him. So super amazing. Like in a matter of seconds, you can know everything about this one employee that you're thinking about. Or if you're asking a question about like a whole department, I'm going to cheat and have it open here, but like which employees in engineering are below their pay bands. So the system can do the analysis. It's generating actually a table. So it's not just a wrapper on ChatGPT. It can create charts, graphs, regression, tables that you can export out. Here's all the employees in engineering. Here are all the people who are there below their pay bands. There's 54 people. You can export this into a CSV file and slice and dice it even more. And so you can ask it any different questions. How much is it going to cost me to make adjustments? And it'll be able to answer that question too. So the work
Harris,
you can do in
Harris,
hours, yeah, you should be able to do
quick
in. Go
Quick
ahead.
question for you. Because this is amazing. And I think when I started to see, yeah, the capability and the power, it is like awesome. Like we're not even scratching this, we're just scratching the surface here on, to be honest. But in the interest of time, like I wanted to just ask a question because you hit on most of the things that Matt was walking us through. But one of the points that he made was like, how do you actually stop using spreadsheets like that? There's so many companies that I know are out there that have built these custom tools, and in my experience, we hang on to those because we know they work, and it feels like a huge leap of faith moving away from those. And so, like, I'm just curious, like, what has your experience been in like helping companies move away from those clunky custom spreadsheets they're using?
Yeah, and Stephen, maybe I'm an engineer at heart, so I'm going to answer it from an engineering standpoint, right? There's a crawl, walk, run here. For the first thing you have to be able to do to replace spreadsheets is, can you bring all of the data into one single place in a system? If you don't get that data, then you're going to say, oh, I'm missing this performance rating or something else that's important. I'm going back to my spreadsheet. So getting all the garbage in, garbage out, having good high quality data is super, super key. That's step one. Number two, there's like two flavors to this, but one is, can you visualize information in a way that makes sense for me? Right. And from a software perspective, it might be like, hey, can we customize different columns? Because one customer only looks at OTE, the other customer looks at variable, the other customer looks at base, the other one has a custom formula. Like there is a reason why, because like everyone, has different ways they want to see things and do things and run numbers. And so can your software provide that flexibility so that you can mimic what your organization wants to do or how they want to think about things? Right. The AI version of that is, can we leverage AI to get me answers in a way that makes sense to me, right? Like comp ratio is popular with a lot of people, as Matt was saying. Some people are religious about range penetration, and they can talk to you for an hour about why comp ratio is the wrong thing, right? Like people are people. So can you mold the answer in a way? And that this part was hard without Gen AI, because now you can generate this chart, or you could ask it to be a graph or add 3 more columns. So can you give
Yeah.
us the answer in a way that makes sense for us? I think that
So
there is a human change management aspect, but if you do those 3 things, then humans are also, I think, willing to meet in the middle a little bit. But if bad data, bad visualization, lack of like what you want to see and how you want to see it, like I think those are some of the challenges with tools that kind of drive people to go back to spreadsheets.
So what I'm hearing is just by streamlining your data into a single solution, things are going to be simplified, and you're going to be able to get rid of a lot of the things that the manual headaches that we have in the process. And so I'm going to keep us moving because this is just the beginning. We still have 2 more sections. We may need to consolidate some of them to get to Q&A, but the next section I want to talk about is of the modern playbook is modern comp reviews. And so Matt, I'm going to hand back over to you for your portion of the rapid fire. Like, what are you seeing from a merit cycle comp review perspective that really modern HR leaders are doing?
Yeah, I think like quick 30 seconds before I jump into that, like to complement what Haris is talking about. I think for me, the thing that really is resounding through some of the stuff that he's demoing is it's like you're no longer kind of gatekeeping this process. You're not sort of you're not having to be that sort of individual who's constantly having to run these reports. You're kind of empowering others to be able to get the information as well, which is a huge time saver for any comp team. All right, so let's talk about the merit cycle. So I guess we've built this foundation, these fundamentals in terms of our comp philosophy, which is linked to our strategy. We've got the job architecture. We know where our place is in the market, which is fantastic. Then there's the merit cycle, right? Which is this minimally sort of annual process. It's usually incredibly painful, heavy spreadsheet basis. Everyone kind of hates it. Usually, is my experience. It's really, really challenging. I think the way I sort of approach compensation reviews or merit cycles, whatever you want to call them, is usually from the perspective of like, why are we doing this? What's the actual goal that we're trying to accomplish here? Because it can be many. I think by default, most companies tend to run it as a combination sort of quasi market adjustment, merit adjustment sort of piece. But I think there needs to be so much more to it. And I think that's where having that good sort of foundation is really critical to getting clear on what your objective is up front. I mean, especially if you have something like CandorIQ, which can give you a real dashboard of like, where are our people at with when it comes to our pay practices? What are the areas we need to focus on? Is it that we need to reward performance? So is it that merit-based thing? Is it the fact that the market has moved and we want to make sure that we're no longer aligned with our pay position because the market is constantly adjusting? Is it pay equity? And I'll give you an example here. So here in Australia, we have a whole agency called the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. And every company over 100 has to report their gender pay gap and a bunch of other things to do with pay equity to the government. And not only that, it gets published on the internet. So your company and your gender pay gap and all the data to do with pay equity and things like that is totally public. Anyone from around the world can go and have a look at it right now. What that does is create that as a goal for these annual cycles, because as you can imagine, it's a board level discussion. The fact that you can look at your gender pay gap, that your competitors are looking at your gender pay gap and can see whether or not they're better or worse. It's obviously a talent driver in the sense that it's important to people. So that may be a goal as well of running a compensation cycle. So I think first and foremost is getting really clear on like what's the objective, why we're actually running this process, and making sure that the whole process is built around that before we sort of run it. Secondly, we've sort of talked about one of the real misses when it comes to that sort of pay experience. Second, I'd say is like, are your managers trained? So, before you sort of, if you're in spreadsheets, build your spreadsheet, build your process, be really clear about like what the role of the manager is, or any stakeholders for that matter, and be really clear. If you can do a really high level journey map around what their role is, but even as minimal as sort of like educating people about what some key terms are. So I mentioned comp ratio, Haris mentioned range penetration. These words mean very little to anyone who's kind of trying to run their job at the moment, right? So on an annual basis, you need to be reminding people what these things mean so that they don't get caught up in your kind of like compensation gobbledygook, but that they actually understand what it means and how to apply it to the role that they play within the compensation cycle. I think as well, like, do they understand the comp philosophy? Can you run a refresh on that? Can you run a refresh on your pay position as a company and levels and how all of that works? Make it really clear about what it is that we're trying to accomplish as well and their role in helping us achieve that objective. I'm going to kind of weave in, I think, as well, like elements of that sort of employee experience section that we're going to touch on at the end, because I think for me, that's one of the most critical. I think, running an effective comp cycle and not being too manual is definitely important, but the EX is just as important. Communication could not be more important, not only to your managers, but to your people when it comes to the comp cycle. I think letting your people know when you run the cycle, what's involved in it, when the outcomes happen, the timeline, any expectations you have on them. I mean, I've worked at places where performance reviews are a requirement to be able to get a pay adjustment or to be considered for promotion. So you want to make sure that people have had every chance to understand and digest that information before you get to the cycle. Otherwise, you're going to have them be very upset because they've missed something, they haven't understood, and it's negatively or it's adversely impacted them. So make sure that you're really clear with them. Another really, like, this is super practical, but something that I've seen work really well at the companies that I've either worked with or worked in is this kind of like pre and post comp cycle town hall. I love like getting up in front of the whole town, the whole town, the whole company, and just talking about like, what are our comp practices? How did we come up with our pay position? Why? What goes into it? What are our goals as well? And like, you don't have to go into the detail of like sharing your specific budget, but I mean, even things like sharing the comp ratio, like what's the comp ratio or the range penetration for the whole company, maybe broken down by departments, things like that. And what are we trying to change as a result of this cycle? I like it for a couple of reasons. One is that it obviously gives your people insight into something they rarely ever see. Two is that it kind of, in a sort of little bit of a sneaky way, it kind of makes your managers really accountable to those goals as well, right? Like everyone's got a cowboy manager who's like, I'm going to go above budget, or I'm going to give all my budget to this one person, or, all of these sorts of issues. And you can say to them, look, I agree with it or not, at the end of the day, I'm going to be communicating all of these results and these outcomes to our organization, and we're accountable to our organization. If you're comfortable with this, unless you have some other way to prevent it from happening, that's fine. But people are going to look at it out the other side when you talk about the outcomes of the compensation review, and they're going to go, oh, why does this department like got massive skews between how they pay their people, whether they've got heaps of people below band or heaps of people above band, whatever it might be. So that's a really great way I've seen to sort of bring the company along with you as you're running through that cycle, set expectations, timeframes, things like that. I think another really key step, just getting back into the mix of like the actual comp cycle, is the calibration piece. So often, intentionally or not, everyone's got bias. And I think so often companies miss a step by making sure that within a department and then across a department, you've really got consistency in the decision-making criteria that you're applying to performance and promotions, but also compensation as well. If we're giving, merit-based pay increases, is your exceeds expectations the same as my exceeds expectations? Are we seeing that consistently applied as well? So within departments, it's always great to have like the head of department be the sort of deal breaker or the, the gatekeeper of that. But across departments, I think just having like a little committee of execs or something like that just involved to make sure that we're being really consistent in that process. I mean, another one I'll touch on is like automation. I think, the fewer manual touch points, the better. We've talked about data so much. I think first and foremost, just getting your data right is obviously really critical. Translating it between systems. I mean, the relationship between getting it all into one spreadsheet, having multiple spreadsheets for managers so that they can do their increases, having to, and hopefully without breaking them, getting it all back into one spreadsheet, getting it into letters, getting it into something else that, that there's so many ways for that to break. So I think the more you can introduce automation, the more you can have that data be managed consistently from end to end, the better. And of course, as well, if you're a company that does audits and things like that. I don't know if there's anything else I want to say from the employee experience perspective. I think, at the end of the day, you really want to, kind of give your managers the power to be able to explain the decisions that have happened. There's nothing worse than them giving a letter to someone and saying, I don't know where this number came from, speak to HR. And suddenly at the end of this cycle, your entire HR team is inundated with questions and appeals for more pay, things like that. So the more you can empower them by, reminding them of the comp philosophy, reminding them of the goals, what we're trying to achieve, giving them talking points. I've even done like a really clear traffic, red, orange, green. If someone responds angrily or upset, how to handle it. If someone's kind of like, in the middle, here's how to handle it. If someone's great, I mean, that's the easiest if they're happy with it. But just give them a way to, or a playbook for how to deal with these sorts of things. The thing you want to avoid is your manager feeling like they have to have an answer then and there. You really want them to be able to make that person feel seen, feel heard. You want them to be able to help be someone who can wayfind to a solution. And that solution may be, hey, we've handled this in the best way possible. If you are, looking to grow your pay, let's talk about progression. Let's talk about promotion. Let's talk about these other avenues that are there rather than just saying, no, you've got what you've got. Good luck with the rest of it. So I think that's another really key part of the employee experience that I would, I can harp on about all day.
Yeah, I mean, it gets overlooked so often, the manager experience, and it's like HR leaders, we've got to help our managers. Let's set them up to be successful. I know we've been over this every year for the last something we repeat, but it's so important. So we're not gonna have time to cover everything, y'all. I just wanted to remind. So if you, for the audience, if you did have a magic wand and there's one thing to fix, and the things that we've talked about so far, what would it be? What would your magic wand fix be? Haris, go ahead and take us out. Let's take us out with your response to the merit cycle question. And like Matt did, factor in some EX components where you can, because we're going to have to skip that section for today, but we will be sharing the full playbook as a follow-up to your point earlier. So over to you, Haris.
I got laid off in November 2022. And I just remember having so many mixed emotions. I was sad, I was embarrassed, but I was also relieved. One moment, asking my wife if I should quit my job and try to make MPL work. And the next day, that decision's being made for me. And, I'm lucky. Most people don't have a passion project to fall back on like the MPL. And it's terrifying and confusing trying to navigate your next steps after something like a layoff. And honestly, the outplacement services that were offered to me at the time felt pretty underwhelming. They didn't seem like they'd actually help. And I just remember feeling frustrated and a little bit bummed. I thought about asking for more support, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I realized that the leaders managing the process were just as overwhelmed and frustrated as I was. They were being asked to do more with less. They were handling these layoffs with little support or guidance, all while trying to protect the company's culture and take care of their people. And so that's why Career Sandwich's mission really hit home for me when I met them. It's not just another outplacement service. It's holistic transition support that helps both individuals and the people leaders who support them, giving everyone a little bit of peace of mind during a really crazy time like a layoff. And they do more than just help your alumni brush up on their resume. They help them tell their story, from figuring out who they are to defining where they want to go next. Career Sandwich helps them craft a narrative that really makes sense of the journey, and their platform is pretty sick. There's one-on-one coaching, there's group workshops, there's on-demand resources that are designed to help alumni really articulate their value, the story, and feel a little bit more confident about their next steps in a time that feels very uncertain. And so, if you're an HR leader that's having to part ways with people from your team and need support making this process as least crappy as it can possibly be, then I highly recommend checking out Career Sandwich. If you want to get in contact with their team, go to careersandwich.com/MPL. That's careersandwich.com/MPL.
That sounds good. So I think I'll call out two things. Share a slide. So one of it is at least the compensation cycle, the merit cycle. It's not the 2 weeks where managers are plugging in numbers. That's what the CEOs think, and I used to think that way too myself at some point. Really, if you look at it, and Matt articulated this, but this visual capture is, if you're doing a 2 week comp cycle, it's actually you're doing a 3-month process, from like pre-planning to budgeting to exec alignment to strategic alignment to training the managers, collaboration, approvals, communicating down to employees. I'm doubtful that most companies are doing comp cycles in 2 weeks. That's what the CEO or the CFO thinks. It's, if you actually take a look at all the pieces that go under the hood, it's a 2-month minimum process or 3 months. And if you do that twice a year, can you imagine what that means? Like that's someone who's spending like half the year kind of basically doing this. So I just wanted to kind of crystallize that. The second point I'll call out is you also have to think holistically. Like, it's not just about the comp strategy, it's about what's your overall budget and workforce, and what's your work. Are you spending more on retention or hiring and stuff like that too? So to Matt's point, jumping into the product, I'm log in as an admin user, just kind of clicking into the comp cycle. So I'm not going through the whole setup flow, but having a single view of your employees, having charts, analytics, driving approval chains, collaboration workflows, commenting capabilities, all of that stuff is helpful. The other thing I'll call out, automation, to your point, Matt. At least if with the right tools, you should be able to drive more collaboration. You should be able to provide more reporting and drive more automation. So here's an example of automation, right? So like, if you have ideas as a people leader, a framework of what you want to do, can you program that like by performance or a merit matrix, or find all the people below the pay bands and adjust them, or same with equity or bonus. And so if a tool can help you automate some of those pieces, that's definitely helpful. As an example, I'm just going to plug in some numbers. People who have a high performance score, I want to give them 10%. And you can see like it updated the numbers. It's suggesting changes for all the different employees. It's doing that automatically. The system's also figuring out what the spend looks like. How is your comp ratio changing? How are things evolving by department, or is there any unfairness by gender or other ratings or other ways as well? So that's where the software can help, because it should be able to really quickly give you that full view, right? And then, like, let's say you start that cycle and you give it to a manager to come in. Having that table view is helpful, having the recommendations helpful, having like visual roll up of how the dollars are being spent. The squeakiest wheel shouldn't necessarily get the higher budget. It should be really kind of tied to the goals, as we talked about, Matt. And so that's one way you can like leverage a tool like our comp cycle tool to kind of do that. And again, you have to have the flexibility to what you were saying, Stephen. Like, different customers some have target bonuses, some have percentages, some have ratings in fractions and letters. So the tool needs to evolve more and kind of fit. And then that's one thing. The second point I'll call out is what I was saying is this should all roll up into like your overall workforce plan for the year. So like, if you have an overall plan for hiring and you're building out a hiring plan, you're building out, some exits, some reorgs, some budget spend, being able to understand like overall what your spend looks like, what the breakdown is, like cash based, bonus, variable, tax, et cetera, that kind of gives you the full picture. So if you have $1 million to spend, how much of it is going to each comp cycle and how much is going for like, employee, like new candidate hiring and thinking about that too. So I generally encourage people to think about that. I saw notes about finance. Yeah, finance people love spreadsheets. So this is where the tool can help because it helps drive that finance HR collaboration. It helps drive like, align executives too. The last piece of it is around, I think we talked about employee transparency and education. And I think of it as maybe the right answer is pay translucency. But what I mean by that is there's no one right answer, right? Like it's an evolving answer and you should do what you're comfortable with. I showed some tooling to empower managers with analytics. I think managers are a really key component around pay transparency because imagine you go from 0 to 100% transparent and managers can't talk about salary, equity, or benefits with their employees. That's just the HR team is going to have to carry that bag and it's not going to achieve the outcomes you're hoping to achieve. So like, yes, having a total rewards experience for employees where you can see total pay and pay history and equity history and see benefits, that's definitely valuable. Giving it to managers so they can see what their employees are seeing is even more valuable. Doing this at the candidate level. So if you're putting together a candidate offer, for example, tying that back to the job architecture, tying it back to what existing employees are making, you kind of want to connect all the dots, right? Like you're putting an offer together, you want to know budget, you want to know your pay strategy, you want to know where existing employees sit. In this example, this offer I'm putting together, we're paying above the range and we're paying above most employees. So I'm going to change this number and save, right? So that's an example. And ultimately, the employee experience starts with the candidate, right? So it's really the full life cycle. So having a beautiful experience for candidates where they can see not just the numbers, but also the vision and the goals and the KPIs, along with the numbers, along with the equity, along with the benefits and the other things as well. You kind of want to be able to stitch together and have a full picture. And so I think that's
awesome.
really yeah.
Haris, I've got a feature request. One of the biggest things when you showed that beautiful timeline slide, I was like, one of the things that always trips me up is that execs on leave. Can you like import the leave calendar, please, so that we can factor that in?
We actually can, Matt. So like one, you can bring it in from your HRIS, but we also have leave of absence termination. So you can do some forward-looking scenario modeling of what you think might happen, and you don't want to necessarily capture in your payroll just yet. So double yes.
Wow.
So good.
In classic MPL fashion, we ran late. And so we
Sorry,
only have
y'all.
1 minute left, and we're gonna keep that 1 minute for one word or phrase close. If you had a question in the chat or in the Q&A, we'll be sure that either Haris or Matt responds via email. So we'll make sure that they get your information.
And one more thing, Daniel, if you want the full playbook, to make sure we get it to you, just drop playbook in the chat and we'll make sure that we get it to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, we'll make it accessible to everyone. And thank you. I apologize. This is on me for cramming too much in our agenda today. Back to you, Daniel.
Yeah. All right. So let's do one word close. Haris, you want to go first? What's coming to mind for you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to anchor on the pay translucency because it summarized the three different things. There's, I talked about agile. There's no one right answer. So people shouldn't feel like there's one academic, right, perfect answer. You have to work towards it, right? Work towards it, bring in your management, bring your leadership. This is a multiplayer effort. And so like those are the things I'll wrap up on.
I'm like Ron Burgundy. I just read whatever I see, and I see playbook, so that's my one word close.
You always do that. I'm gonna go with
one
better.
Word
I'm
response.
gonna go with a couple words. I'm gonna go with better days because I think there are better days for comp teams ahead. I really feel that way. Matt.
Yeah, I'm going for a hyphenated one, like 3 hours, which is probably how long this could have been because I think there's just so much involved in, just one part of a HR or a comp person's role. So it's comprehensive.
Comprehensive. Love that.
Which could have been the word.
Well, thank you everybody for joining. This was awesome. I wish we could have covered more. Maybe there will be a follow-up session one day. But yeah, have a good rest of your Thursday and your week. And this was great.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.